Hello, my friends. Welcome to my corner. When it comes to Japanese literature of the Heian period, there are three classics, right? We have the Tale of Genji, which many people have described as the first novel ever published. There's also The Pillow Book, a record of courtly life by Ise Shonagon. And then there is Tales of Ise, a work of storytelling that combines poetry and prose. Now, I have not read The Tale of Genji yet, and when I do, you will certainly hear about it. And I do owe you that video on The Pillow Book that I promised you many months ago. But here's the good news. My friend Quentin has videos on both of these books, The Tale of Genji and The Pillow Book. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to link his channel, Idjit Reads and Rambles, to the description of this video so that you can visit him and listen to his great discussions on these works. What I want to focus on today is Tales of Ise, the underrated gem of Heian literature. And I want to start with the Borges connection. As you may know, there is always, or almost always, a Borges connection. So that's what I want to explore. Here's the interesting thing. The Tale of Genji and The Pillow Book were not the books that Borges chose to include in his Biblioteca Personal, the list of 100 works that were, the most important books that he had read. He decided to include Tales of Ise. So what I wanted to do is I wanted to share some of the comments that Borges has about this work very briefly before we explore the actual book. So the first thing that Borges points out is that Japanese literature does not begin with the sword. Okay, if you look at national literatures or the literature of a culture, most of the time you see that the first thing they produce is an epic, right? Not so with Japanese literature. Borges points out that Japanese literature seems to favor the lyrical type of poetry at the beginning. So you see themes of nature, themes of the colors of the seasons, the passing of time, love, all of those types of themes. And he observes that in 1979, in a history of Japanese literature by Dr. Kato, this author compares Ariwara no Narihira, the hero of the Tales of Ise, to Don Juan. Okay, and Borges says, yeah, I can see that, but it's not exactly accurate for this reason. Don Juan is a Catholic, okay, and he is conscious that he is breaking a divine moral code with his actions. Whereas Ariwara no Narihira is, and I'm going to quote here, a hedonist in an innocent and pagan world. A world not yet perturbed by the Tao and by the righteous observation of the Buddha's Noble Eightfold Path. From this side or the other of good and evil, these classic Japanese pages ignore morality and immorality. So we have a world that is beyond, if you will, good and evil, in a sense. And there's another thing that I thought was interesting that Borges points out, and that is that the inhabitants of this place called Ise were perceived as liars. Okay, so the very title of the book, Tales of Ise, suggests that the stories that we are reading may be false or fabricated. The very title, in other words, takes away authority from the book. It's an ambiguous title. So I thought that was very interesting. Let's look at the contents first. Okay, we have 125 episodes in this book that combine poetry and prose. Poetry seems to be the priority. That's the way that I perceive it, because most of the time the prose that you see in the episodes is very brief. In some of them it's only one line, and then you get the poetry. And what the prose does is to illuminate the poetry or to explain the circumstances under which the poetry was written. So you see what I mean? That's why I say that poetry seems to be the prevalent mode here in this book. Now, this harmonious combination of poetry and prose is something that is very dear to Japanese literature. And you have, examples of that throughout the history of this literature, from classical times to more modern times. There is, of course, Basho's The Narrow Road to the Deep North, a work of a travel work, a work of traveling that includes both poetry and prose. And also, close to the modern period, you have Natsume Soseki's great little novel Kusamakura, which also includes poetry and prose. So you could see in the Tales of Ise maybe a precedent to that kind of a text. The hero of these stories is the poet and lover Ariwara no Narihira, as I said before. So throughout this book, what we see is different adventures. Most of them concern him, and we meet him at different stages of his life. Regarding the author, right, this book was not really composed by a single author. It is believed that many people contributed to it within a period of 100 years. So we do have an anonymous work with the Tales of Ise. Let's talk a little bit now about the theme, okay? And the main topic of this book is one of my favorite topics ever, love, okay? In all its forms, in all its complexity. You have love between men and women, love between men in the sense of friendship, filial love, the love that a man may feel for his prince, right? For the person who is above him in the hierarchy. And you will see that in the world of the Tales of Ise, the characters may have several spouses, or they may have, numerous love affairs, and that is considered to be normal, as Borges points out in his introduction to the book. As Borges suggests, this is a world of free love, but that by no means means that this is a world free of jealousy, or of heartbreak, or of tears when it comes to the relationships between men, women, and men between themselves, and all the kinds of combinations that you can possibly have. Let's look at the structure now, okay? So what we have here is that the poems that you will see in Tales of Ise follow the waka form, okay? It's basically this structure. You have 5 lines, and the syllable count is 5, 7, 5, 7, 7. So you may be thinking, Jorge, isn't that tanka? Yes, it is, my friend. It is what we know today as tanka. But here's something to consider. What we call tanka today was only one of several forms that waka poetry included. So we have, in a way, simplified the term, It's really waka, and within that, tanka. So that is the way to describe it when it comes to the structure of the poetry. The situations that inspire the poems are not particularly spectacular or anything like that, and I want to share 2 examples with you. For example, in episode number 4, a man visits his former lover's house, and he feels her absence, right? It's like this touching moment. That's just it, that's what you get. And then the poetry based on that. And then in episode number 110, what we have is that after receiving a message from a lady saying that she saw him in one of her dreams, a man says, oh yeah, that must be my spirit. I have such longing to be with you that my spirit just left me and just went to you. So if you find my spirit, please just keep it there, just bind it with a spell or something so that I can go and recover it. So you see what I'm saying, right? Not spectacular moments or anything like that, but memorable moments that give birth to poetry. You have very brief but just powerful poems that very often include incredibly complex wordplay, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that in a second. So what about the prose? Okay, I've talked about the poetry. What about the prose? I think the prose was exquisite. It's just beautifully economical, very, very brief, but suggestive. And many of the episodes that we find here might be described as what we today call short shorts. You know what I mean? Those little short stories that sometimes do not really focus on plot, etc., etc. It's that type of thing. I want to share with you 3 examples, okay, of the kind of story that you will find in Tales of Ise. The first one is episode number 6, in which 2 lovers who are eloping are interrupted by a storm. And so the storm comes in, and the guy says, okay, I'm going to hide you. He decides to hide the lady in this empty storehouse, not knowing that this empty storehouse is inhabited by demons. So that is the episode right there. It's fantastic. It sounds really good, right? Number 23 is about 2 lovers who get married. They really love each other, but the problem is that due to financial difficulties, the man is basically forced to marry a second wife. So you have his feelings for the 2 women who are very different, also the feelings of the 2 women towards the situation, the awkward situation in which they find themselves. It's really a very good episode. And the other example that I wanted to mention was episode number 69, which is an ambiguous tale of forbidden love. In this one, a hunter falls in love with the priestess of Ise. And here's the problem. The priestess of Ise is supposed to remain a virgin. So you see what kind of stories we have, right? I just wanted to mention those examples just to give you an idea of the kind of tale and the kind of poetry also that you will find in this book. About the edition, okay, as you can tell, I have the Penguin edition, which was published in 2016, and this features a translation with commentary by Peter MacMillan, and also a foreword by Donald Keene. Wonderful introduction, to the point, not excessive or anything like that. And then we have over 120 pages of commentary. So the commentary is longer than the work itself. It's very detailed, and it really gives you a lot of insight into each one of the stories. There are also several appendices. Okay, you get a glossary, you have maps that show you, the place where the stories occur. You also have information about historical characters, because there are many of those right here. And my favorite appendix was the one that includes romanized transliterations of all of the poems included in the collection. So I thought that was a really, really nice thing to have. It gives you an idea of the sound of the poetry, So even though I do not speak Japanese, it feels really nice to be able to read these poems out loud in something close to their original form. There are also a lot of beautiful illustrations throughout the book that illustrate the different stories. So I really like that also, because I'm also a very visual person. I really like visual arts. And the commentary, it's just, it's an astonishing work of exegesis. We really need this type of commentary if we're going to enjoy a work like Tales of Ise in our time. Okay, so what MacMillan does is that he explains the original context in which the stories appeared, right, and in which the episodes happen. The wordplay also that I mentioned before, he gives you a lot of information on that so that you can actually appreciate the wordplay and also to understand the context of the stories. And he clarifies any obscure points that may be obscure to us modern readers, or maybe images that may give, may cause a misunderstanding. Let me give you a classic example, and I was guilty of this. There's a story in which the lady says, "I wish I could be reborn as a silkworm so that I could share the cocoon with my lover." And of course, when I read that, I was like, oh, what a sweet image. Not exactly, okay, not exactly. MacMillan explains that what happens is that when you remove the silk thread, the silkworm dies. So what I thought was a really sweet image is really a commentary on the transience of things and on the fragility of life. So you see what I mean? There are some images that we may perceive as positive, but which carried a whole lot of associations that have been lost to us. So that's why the commentary is really, really helpful in this book. Bottom line, okay, this is really a powerful, unforgettable reading experience. This book has really acquired an aura to me right now. It's like I feel the power just by holding the book in my hands. It was really a revelation to me. I enjoyed it so much, that it's really, I would really describe this as one of my favorite works of Japanese literature these days. It's understandable that Tales of Ise has been eclipsed by the Pillow Book, and especially by the Tale of Genji. Okay, I totally get that. But this is the book for lovers of understatement. That's what I would say, Like Genji, it is a story of a lover. Like the Pillow Book, it's also a journal of sorts. It's a poetic journal, it's a journal about love, so you could say, the mode is different, and it is definitely more focused in its theme than the Pillow Book. But you know what I'm saying, it really has the best of both worlds. I don't mean to diminish in any way, the Pillow Book or the Tale of Genji, but this really has elements of both. And it also has the best of both worlds in the sense that it combines poetry and prose. So you really get, both great poetry and great prose. And I was thinking, wouldn't it be great to imitate this book, Just to, write briefly about a memorable experience that you had, and then just compose a poem about it. I thought that would be a very interesting thing to do these days. You know, what kind of moments would we look for in our world, you know, in our society, in our very different culture, you know, for me at least, a very different culture from the one that saw the appearance of the Tales of Ise. So, you know, just an idea that I'm throwing at you. Do you have any questions, comments, recommendations? Have you read the Tales of Ise? What was your experience with them? I hope you enjoyed this video, my 2 cents on Tales of Ise, the underrated gem of Heian literature. Thank you so much for stopping by, and have a wonderful day.